And hello good people of the internet, it's I, Tommie Kelly. This is Adventures in Woo Woo. Welcome back to the forest for another one of the monthly question and answer videos that we do around here. I'm a bit sick, so my nose is a bit blocked, so I'm going to be very nasally, I would say, in this. I've been sick for months at this point, on and off. We seem to, as a family, have always one person who's sick at one time, and so it continues into, so they make the next person sick, and by the time they get better, the next person's sick. Such is the nature of the place in which we find ourselves. Anyway, there's a deer just right over there, and I was going to turn the camera around, but I assumed as soon as I did that it would run away. It was just kind of staring at me, just completely still for the longest time, to the point where I was going, did someone put a fake deer in a field? But then it moved. Really, really nice, very peaceful. Seems quite young. Anyway, back to what we're doing here. We are going to do answer some questions that people sent me from Patreon and from the Discord server. The Discord server now has a vanity URL, so it should be really easy to get now. It's discord.com/AIWW, with the AIWW standing for Adventures in Woo Woo. So so if you want to join the Discord, now it's easy to find. So let's start with some questions. We're all doing well, and I hope none of you are sick. Jason, what is your take on the difference, if any, between entities commonly thought to have independent existence, such as angels, fae beings, djinn, etc., and man-made entities, like servitors and egregores? I don't know, Jason. This is something that I change my mind about quite often. Recently on the podcast with Spud, we were talking about how things, when you talk about different things, it all depends on what kind of perspective you're taking from it. Particularly if you have an ultimately non-dual perspective, say, because ultimately you can just go, they're all the same, they're all one, everything's the same, it's all part of the one emanation, it's all part of the one thing, everything has one taste, etc. It's not really answering your question though, and it's also not how we perceive things either, so it's not really that helpful. But from certain levels, it is true. From a certain perspective, it's true. Or certain, levels and that kind of thing, and the kind of example I was given in the podcast was a bit of ladder, and that implies that one is a higher order, and in some ways it is, I suppose, but it implies that it's better, which is not what I'm implying. You know, that if you're up higher and you see that gods are the same as humans, whatever, that's not to imply that a view that thinks there's a separation is a less good view, or less helpful, or less true view. Completely rambling at this point. Your actual question, for me, what I would think is that because we have, as humans, a very limited view of things and understanding of things, and how we can look and we very much project ourselves onto the world rather than seeing it for what it is, or onto creation or whatever, I would have to suggest that the servitors and egregores that we create are going to be very limited or watered down versions of what the angels, gods, separate beings, if we believe them to exist, and let's say we do for the sake of this question, being if they're extinct or existed from the, before us, they would have a wider cosmology, an understanding of the cosmology that we wouldn't have, and would have abilities and views and ways of seeing the world that we wouldn't have. So a servitor created by a human is always going to be limited by that human nature and that human understanding and that human creativity and wants and needs, and being bound in time and all of these things. That it's just, it's not to say that they can't work as good as we all know they do, or at least seem to, or for some people. So yeah, I would say that would be the difference. But then make a servitor to give you something that is outside of human thought or something. So I mean, you could play with that a wee bit. So yeah, but ask me on another day and I'd say they're all the same. Or none of it exists. Emma, what would a top 5 or 10 Tommie Kelly reading list look like? I feel bad asking because I have a tough time making lists like this. And then another question, but I'll come back to that one. 5 or 10, I don't know. What I can talk about in this, because one of my videos I do have a top 5 book list. It was from years ago, and people, it's the one that people leave kind of terrible, not terrible, I don't not get terrible kind of comments on YouTube, but the most one that people give out about, because it's obviously something they want to know about. So I'm going to do another one. And the reason I give out about it is because the music's too loud, voice is too echoey, it's just not a great video put together, my voice isn't great enough, blah, blah, blah. Not the question asked. So what I can say in this is the top 5-6 books or whatever that impacted me the most, or had a kind of changed my opinion about things, or I found most helpful at the time. That's not to say I would recommend them to other people to have the same thing. I don't think this list would work for people in the same way that it worked for me. Stuart Wilde's The Quickening was very formative for me, and Stuart Wilde's still a huge influence on me, despite I have many differing opinions around his views. Then he's some very odd and problematic views. But that was when I was fairly early teens, one of the first kind of forays into spirituality, the first kind of times I was exposed to a lot of these kind of ideas. And I really liked his sense of humour. I really liked he was kind of, I don't know, he had that cheekiness to him, or he wasn't part of the establishment, or he had more of a kind of, I suppose, a fool or a jester type role, or a trickstery type thing to him, that I found very helpful in kind of removing myself from a lot of the programming that had, I've been given growing up from Catholics, being brought up a Catholic or whatever, or at least being aware of it, that there is another view. You can have a different view than this, and to give you that kind of ammunition to show the ludicrousness of some of the thoughts around Christianity. The whole end of the Quickening has a whole section that's really funny, or at least was back in the day, about how some of the stories in the Bible are quite bizarre. So I found that quite helpful back in the day. If I was to recommend a Stuart Wilde book to anyone, I'd recommend Infinite Self. So another book that I'd recommend, or that was a huge influence on me, but I probably not necessarily would recommend, although it depends, a lot of people come up this way too, is the Satanic Bible. And it came at a time in my life where I really needed it. And it was, and I was aware that I needed it, and I was aware that it was a kind of a process or something that I was just going through, and it was kind of a way to bring a bit of empower myself. And it's, there's a lot of stuff that you kind of get about complaints about the Satanic Bible, apart from people think it's a bit ludicrous and all that, is that it's an awful lot of the might is right, and the strongest survives and all that. Well, of course that's in it, but at the time I kind of needed a bit of strength and a bit of power, and to be allowed to remove myself from the shackles of what was going on around me. I was a very low time in my life. Probably it's around the time where things started first falling apart, which ultimately led to the 47. So that was kind of it was important in that it was part of the process of when I fell apart, rebuilding myself. And I have a lot of time for Anton LaVey. I think he's again, the trickstery type thing. A lot of bad things too. There's problems with all of these people. His owning a lion as a pet and seemingly not looking after him is I find quite hard to deal with, just because I'm a highly sensitive person who can't deal with that sort of stuff. But so there was a lot in that I needed to hear at the time. Would I recommend someone else read it? Probably not. Same with something like the Necronomicon, which I found really helpful, and I could get it to work, and ultimately became like an influence on the 47s, because that whole thing of the 50 names of Marduk, where you had sigils, and it was like, there was no divination element to it, obviously, but there was I enjoyed the sigil-y kind of, a particular aspect of God was available to you through the sigil in this name, and it could teach you about gardening or money or whatever it was. So that too, it was allowed me to enter into a space of allowing magic to happen in that way that previously hadn't really worked for me. And it was, I'd not that I was scared of, say, of goetic stuff. The wind's picking up here, it's lovely, the leaves are just falling down around me. What a wonderful day. Probably not great for the microphone though. And so that was another kind of good one. Again, would I recommend it? Probably not, although why not? It's a good chaos magic grimoire. That's the best I can describe it as. The Baptist Head trilogy goes without saying, if you've been following the podcast at all. Big fan of the Duncan Barford and Alan Chapman. Very, very helpful on the path. If you're in the kind of awakening kind of element of, or working on yourself, the shadowy work, or trying to sort all this out, the great work element of magic rather than, the high magic rather than the low magic, not with all the caveats that come with that kind of description of things, then the Bab's Head trilogy is, it's a great help. Some people don't warm to Alan's personality a lot. Some people just don't really like it. I'm fine with it. I'm okay with that kind of being a musician. And Alan is a musician, so like being a musician, being around an awful lot of high energy egos. Alan's quite tame when it comes to an awful lot of egos I've come around, but if you haven't been around that type of expression, then I guess maybe it can be hard to take. And I know some of my good friends really, have struggled with it, but if it's still, I think I would still consider it worth reading. So that is ones I would still recommend, even though, brain fog. So I would recommend, not just that it was because it was helpful for me on the path, but I think it could be helpful for other people, those things. And Duncan Barford's other books, and get into Alan's Magia, if you want. If that particular flavour suits you, it's not for everyone. The Magia stuff, I'm like not sure it's 100% for me either. In fact, it isn't. Beat around the bush. Right, other books. Best fiction book is Jonathan Strange, Mr. Norrell. Hands down, it's my favourite book of all time. Love it. Audiobook's really good if you want to go that way. It's about 30 hours though. The first time I read Liber Null, it was really good, eye-opening, and really made me feel like there was great possibilities, and that the future could be bright, and things could work out, and that I had power and all of that stuff. On subsequent rereadings, I don't like it quite as much, and I think there's better Chaos Magic primers. Possibly Advanced Magic for Beginners by Alan Chapman, which is the one that I do actually recommend people if they're looking for a starter book. But or something by Ramsey Jukes or something like that. So is that 5? Is that 6? I'm sure I'm missing out some stuff. Yeah, books that were important to me along the way. Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha by Daniel Ingram, another fantastic book. Worth your time. Read some Peter Kingsley. Get annoyed, but lots of insights. So yeah. Emma, your second part of this question is, I always think a podcast about music, your personal music endeavours, influences, stuff you really like, would be good. Yeah, I will do that. That would be interesting. Abraxas, as someone who's spent a fair amount of time actually working on yourself and sorting out your mental and emotional baggage, how do you deal with being in close relationships with people who haven't done any of the great work? One of the hardest kind of things to come to terms with, having done an awful lot of work, and particularly when I came out of therapy, when I'd done a lot of therapy and had worked on myself and became very kind of aware of where my shadow was and what my bullshit was, and how I let roles play out in my life, and how I'd let people treat me, and how I trained people to treat me, and how I'd moved and manoeuvred to within my life around other people. And then seeing how, unhelpful that was, or how counterproductive that was, or how harmful that was to myself, I assumed that by changing my behaviour and having a new perspective and a new outlook on life, that it would somehow change the situation, or change the people, or change my relationships. That, for an example, say someone at your work is really condescending to you all the time, and so you work on yourself and you go, well, I don't feel that I need to be condescended to. You grow, you're in up power, you become confident or whatever, and then they start being condescending to you, and you either react to it, like say, I don't appreciate that, or and somehow don't allow it, or whatever. And I assumed that by doing that the behaviour of the other person would stop, because you stood up for yourself, and you're not tolerating this anymore. What actually happened in reality is that it just caused more arguments, and the people and the behaviour that I was trying not to engage with or allow them to do that to me, they became more entrenched in it, and I became more like I was always causing hassle. I was the problem. I was the one being, in a sense, the bad guy, because I was trying to change the dynamic of what these relationships and these interactions had been forever. And so I just kind of said, well, I can either continue the rest of my life having the same argument and trying to stop this person at work, whoever, it's a terrible example, of condescending to me, or I can just allow them to be condescending to me and have to learn to be okay with that, because they're never, ever going to change. and no amount of you standing up or you not allowing it or you working on yourself or doing any of that is going to change anyone else or the situations around you. And it was really hard to deal with, because it means the thing that, in the sense that you were working on, you just have to make the decision: do I just battle this, or do I let it? It's not even let it go. It's just, do I just accept it? And ultimately, you pick your battles, and some of them you just go, well, this person's never going to change in this regard, and it's pointless trying to change it, because you're only causing more and more arguments, more disruptions in your life, more tension. And so that's the hardest kind of thing. And in the other point, I suppose, the other thing about when you're the person who's doing the work, and most people who are doing the great work or doing the work or doing any kind of this working on themselves, they'll be the one in their kind of our community, that's too strong a word, they're in their kind of circle that is doing it. So it can feel like you're the person who's the thing that there's something wrong with, because you have to work on yourself, you're trying to be better, and all these people around you aren't, because as far as they're concerned, in many ways, they're fine, they don't need to work on themselves. Like, so many people I know don't think they have issues, and clearly they have issues, but because we all do. No, I don't hang around with a bunch of people who are more issued than other people. But it's like, so when you're the one working on it and trying to deal with it and going to therapy, it can kind of feel, or whatever you're doing, it can kind of feel like there's something wrong with you, that you're broke and everyone else around you isn't. But it's just a case that you're the one looking at it. You're the one staring into the darkness where all of them aren't. But they can kind of see you as well as the broken one, because you're trying to sort this out, and you get a lot of things, oh, you're thinking too much, or when just let it go, man up, just get over it, all of this stuff, and there's nothing wrong with me, and just like all of this kind of stuff. And so you can kind of feel quite, well, I did, taken out of the circle in a sense. So there's parts of it that it's sad in a sense, because when you work on yourself and you see things aren't going to change in the way you wanted them to change, that can be quite sad. But also you can become, I suppose, separated from the people you love a bit on one level, because there's just this kind of rift gap between you that it's hard to sometimes maneuver around. The third kind of thing as well, and the warning with it as well, is also to make sure you don't feel you're better than other people because you're doing this work. That's a very easy trap to fit into, that I'm getting help, you're not, and I'm sorting out my life, you're not, all this kind of stuff. Everyone's on a path, everyone's doing the thing, and whatever perspective or whatever level or whatever plateau you find yourself, you're still doing a lot of shitty things, and be aware of that it doesn't just, 10 weeks of therapy or, doing a shadow work course or whatever it is, sorting out one aspect of your thing makes you, a better person than other people. That's just another shadow. Aranya, 17. I doubt I'm pronouncing that right. Aranya, 17. What is your take on the 4 agreements? I don't know if you've spoken about on this before, but it's something I find myself thinking of often and understand new ways to interpret. If you're interested, I'd like to hear your thoughts. I listened to the audiobook of the 4 agreements years and years and years and years ago, and I couldn't actually tell you what the 4 of them are. So I know I didn't even finish the audiobook, and that wasn't anything to do with the book. That was to do with the narrator and the quality of the actual audiobook itself. It's something that's coming up an awful lot recently, so it's something I want to look into. But every time I go to see it, it's like there's a kind of a witchy woo-woo shop in the village town I live in, and they have it. So it's like 24 quid, and it's a wee tiny paperback book that you can get for a tenner on Amazon. And as much as I want to support local industry and all that, I'm not paying 14, more, 1.5 times the price, 14 quid more for a book. But I've seen it a number of times, and every time I see it, it's something like that. It's too expensive, or I go, I must just get that on Amazon, and then don't. So but it's popped up enough, and including this question, that it's something that I think I will look at. Very, very highly recommended by people who know things. So yeah, Grayson. I don't recall if anyone has asked this before, but is your wife into magic? And what beliefs are you raising the wee man with? My wife's not really into magic per se, but she's really, really good at the kind of law of attraction-y type stuff and the positive thinking and the gratitude. She's a gratitude diary that she does every day. And she is one of those kind of things that when she sets her mind on something, she always gets it, always. To the point of she had a vision board once where when she wanted to get into, because she's a preschool teacher, and she has her own business now, her own preschool, but before she got into that, when she was just kind of studying and trying to make into it, she did a vision board all about what she wanted, and she ended up working in a place that had the exact floor that was in her vision board, down to stuff like that she can nail things really, really well, you know. And so but she wouldn't, like, she's never doing a banishing ritual, she's never you know, she does lots of sigils, and she does use the 40 servants, a lot of candle stuff. Yeah, you know, she's a yoga teacher too as well, so she has all that kind of element to it, and like as well, she does like the kind of, obviously the physicalness of it, but she has, you know, she does. She's not just into the physicalness of it. She has the kind of the theory around it, and or the spiritual theory around it and stuff like that. So she tries to incorporate all that kind of stuff into it too. So it's not, yeah, she's definitely not a muggle by any chance. What a horrible word. Why did I even say that? Yeah, she wouldn't use magic in the same way. Although that said, like, do I do an awful lot much more different than that? Probably not. Depends. Which kind of coming to your second question, what is how I'm going to raise the wee man and what's his thing? Most of my magic, in fact all of my magic, is to do with shadow work, self-improvement, and becoming a better person. You know, stop being shitty, stop doing these things, stop having these crap thoughts, stop acting in shitty ways. And so it's that kind of idea of turning the shit into gold, you know, the alchemy element of it, the great work stuff. And so that's very easy to instill into a child, or well, that's, you know, let him be whoever he wants, of course, but it's very easy to explain to a child or whatever that, you know, to work on this stuff. The problem, I suppose, you know, to work on the stuff and to become a better person and all that, is to not instill that there's something, you know, there's something broken in you, as well, which I struggle with as well, that I did feel broken for a long, long while. So that's an awful lot of my magic, is that, and trying to see the world for what it is, and not, you know, to follow my own kind of internal knowing, my silent knowing in a kind of a Magia sense, of what it is, of what this is, rather than what I'm told it is. Which is hard, you know, to explain to he's 3 now, or 4-year-old, or, you know, if you even 10-year-old, because, you know, you have to kind of get to a certain understanding of what things are from externalizing, you know, from people telling you and from reading and all that kind of stuff, before you can kind of, like, if you just believed what you believed when you were 3 and just went in that, then it's not going to work out too well for you. But it's like, there still is that kind of silent knowing and to follow, but it's not following your gut either, because your gut can lie to you, because, you know, if you're nervous or you're apprehensive or you're scared, you can have a gut feeling that you shouldn't do something, and that's just nerves. But you can argue it off as, oh no, I'm not, my inner being is saying not to do it, and the deer is back. So I would teach him I would hope to teach him, give him the tools and understanding of how to not hold on to all the stuff that I held on to for years, and try not to have as much of it as you know, and to kind of break the cycles and stuff the stuff that's been handed down to me through the ancestors. But yeah, because I mean, at the same time, you don't want to tell a kid that they can have anything they want. You know, just do a sigil for that, and, you know, Santa will bring it to you, because that's not going to be good for them either, because it's not exactly how it works. But yeah, I'll know more as it goes along. But I'd say most of my magic is a bit, I suppose, if you want for a better word, self-improvement, or if you want a fancier term, ascension, or whatever that is. So that's, you know, I think that's good advice for anyone. Siko. I was wondering, how important do you think ritual, especially established, time-tested ritual, is to the overall success of a magical working? Put it a different way, do you believe a magic user is more bound to ritual to accomplish his or her intent, or with sufficient experience is it possible to move beyond the trappings of ritual to accomplish more through sheer power of intent? A few things in that. Chaos magic perspective would be to do the thing that works. And what that is turned into is do the thing that suits me best, the thing that I think is, you know, that I want to do. That, you know, like, do whatever I want. And that's not really what it is. That's not what it is at all. It's like, it's taking stuff that has been handed down, or tradition, or whatever the word is, or taking stuff that, well, this claim, people said this works, and doing it, finding out about it, finding out what bit works, what doesn't work, why it doesn't work, and all that, and then doing the bits that work, so that you can get rid of all of the dross, or the added bits, and the superfluous. My mouth and my brain don't connect anymore. The extraneous bits that you don't need. Whereas what has happened is people go to, say, a banishing ritual, they look straight at the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram and go, I'm not even trying that, I'm changing all of the angels into Star Trek figures because I don't like angels and I like Star Trek. Which is fine if you're getting the results you want. And how will you know you're getting the same results as doing the lesser banishing ritual if you've never done the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram as described? Also, with the intent thing, it comes down to, what do you believe is the agency of magic? Do you believe it is the belief of the magician, which is the chaos magic paradigm, that it's the belief of the magician that makes the magic work? It's you intending or believing that this magic will work is how the magic comes into manifestation. I used to think that for a long time, and stuff like the secret and law of attraction, mentalism and new thought and all that would certainly say that that would be you're the kind of agency of magic, you're the thing that makes it happen. And the more and more, I'm not sure. And then who's the I we're talking about here? And it's like, because there's certainly things that happen that Tommie isn't aware of. And there's certainly things magic that happens that seem external, but then later seem not. As if there's a part of me that knew something that Tommie, conscious Tommie, didn't at the time. So when we're talking about belief, whose belief? Whose belief is, if belief is the agency of magic, whose belief? The magician? Who's the magician? Which part of the magician? The whole, what is it the roles you're playing? Is it the your subconscious? Is it the, all the different aspects, whatever way you want to go into and break that down, or whatever your cosmology is. But could you have a better time with a banishing ritual that you designed yourself? Yes. Given you have spent time looking at what banishing rituals are, practicing them, actually doing them, to see how to feel, to see how to function, to see how to work, to see what they're actually doing, what the mechanics of it. Why are they angels? Rather than just dismissing them completely because you were brought up Catholic and you hate all things Catholic. And then you can go, okay, well, I understand the mechanics of this, and I can understand where I am in the cosmos, and I can move into doing something that works better for me. Yes. But the wholesale throwing out immediately of tradition or of how things are done, I feel, isn't as helpful as people think. And it's a testament to that is by the amount of people, particularly on Facebook and different occult forums, who keeps them, why is my magic not working? I read this book and then did my own version of it, and now it doesn't work. It didn't work. And, at least once do the thing the way other people have said to do it, and have said, this works. I've tested it out, spent a bit of while, this works, here's, try it out, rather than just immediately going, not for me, I'm going to do my own thing, call up the Star Trek characters. My opinion. Subject to change. I raced Red Carp. What a name. In a good way. I really like it. If possible, what are some magical coincidences that you have experienced lately? I have one big one that I can't really talk about just yet. There will be an announcement soon, where a couple of days before it happened, I had the sense of going, how can I talk about this without talking about it? I had a sense a couple of days before an email arrived asking me to do something that person was going to ask me to do that. And it just came out of nowhere. It's not like something that, my wife came in and asked me to leave out the bins because something that, that is likely to happen. I was kind of going, oh, that's interesting. And I kind of knew it was coming. And it did come. Not really helpful in that, being that I can't talk about it. I'll announce it soon anyway. But other than that, just your kind of standard type stuff of finding the right video on YouTube at the right time, find the right talk. This thing I was talking about, the 4 agreements, that seems to be coming up a fair bit. Not in a huge way, you know, not kind of hitting me on the head or anything, but the last couple of months, it keeps surfacing. I go, that must be something I should look into. Things like that. Nothing ever too big. I'm working on a very particular aspect of my great work at the minute, my shadow work or whatever, which is around sadness and grieving, and it's a big block in my meditation and my Magick work at the minute, and I'm finding that until I deal with that, until I understand that or move through that or whatever, I can't really do anything else, because that's just becoming pretty much all-encompassing, and just, you know, you need to look at this now, and it's very hard to look at, and so I'm kind of slowing down and struggling a wee with that. So all of the other stuff is kind of, I don't know, just out there on the periphery a bit more, but that's okay, in an okay way. Like, I mean, this is what we sign up for, this is what we do, you know, or start looking at these things, and you have to look at them. You know, you can't engage with the stuff and then get annoyed when it shows up. Although there is that old thing of, you know, magic, isn't it always strange and always exciting and always shocking when it actually works? Yeah, so that's it. That's all the questions. What did we do? Half an hour. That's pretty good. Happy with that. Yeah, announcement coming up. The Grimoire, the second edition of the Grimoire has been sent to the proofreaders. So that's, at least, you know, for right now, it feels like we're getting close to an end. It all depends on what the feedback is when they come back and go, oh no, that's terrible, or that's not too bad. Been no Tasta for 2 weeks. Spud is being the horse whisperer yet again for a couple of weeks, but we'll be back on that soon. And yeah, I keep saying I want to do this blog post, but it's been quite busy around Tommie's office and Tommie's head this last while that I just can't get to all the things. I did start on Turbine Syndrome, the next chapter, yesterday, which is great. I'm delighted with that, and hopefully that'll the next chapter will be out before Christmas. Will I test, or will I what's the word? Will I ruin it by saying that? Will I jinx it by saying that? Yeah, so all good. Everything's going well. And I hope everything's going well for you, and I hope the autumn, or I suppose the spring, if, you know, not to assume that everyone is in the same hemisphere as me, it's going well for you. It's lovely here, and yeah, be well. And may your best days be ahead.